The grand celestial hall of Seraphis Prime was the most beautiful place Elias Vance had ever seen. Pillars of living crystal rose toward a ceiling that showed the stars themselves. The floor was polished stone that reflected light like water. Thousands of floating orbs drifted through the air, each one glowing with soft colors. Elias stood near the back of the hall, watching the gathered delegates with quiet eyes. He was Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Assembly. He was also the only human in the room. Around him moved creatures from 12 different species. The Valkyrie were tall and elegant, with silver skin and eyes like liquid gold. They walked with their chins high, as if the universe owed them respect. The Shari were beings made of living crystal, their bodies catching light and throwing rainbows across the walls. The Kethmer were insectoid warriors, their exoskeletons gleaming like armor, their forearms folded with military precision. And then there was Elias, short by comparison. Soft skin, no claws, no natural weapons, no telepathy or special powers. Just a human in a formal black suit, trying not to feel small. Today was supposed to be historic. The Treaty of Eternal Accord would end a Cold War that had lasted 100 years. If the 12 species signed it, peace would spread across the galaxy. If they did not, war would consume everything. Elias had been invited as a courtesy. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Assembly 11 years ago. They were still considered newcomers, children, a species barely worth noticing. A Valkyrie lord approached him. The alien was nearly 8 feet tall, and he looked down at Elias the way a person might look at an interesting insect. "Ambassador Vance," the Valkyrie said. His voice was smooth and cold. "I confess surprised that your species sent a representative. What possible contribution could humans make to such an important event?" Elias had heard this question many times. He had learned not to let it bother him. "We are here to witness history, Lord Velthron," Elias replied. "And perhaps to learn." The Valkyrie laughed softly. "Learn? Yes, that is all your kind can do, I suppose. You have no great technology, no mental powers, no natural strength. Tell me, Ambassador, what useful trait does humanity possess?" Elias thought about the question. He thought about human history, the ice ages they had survived, the predators they had outlasted, the diseases they had beaten, the wars they had fought, and the peace they had built afterward. "We are patient," Elias said simply. Lord Velthron seemed amused by this answer. He shook his head and walked away, losing interest in the human. Elias did not mind. He was used to being underestimated. At the center of the hall sat Empress Ithavalari on a throne carved from a single, perfect gemstone. She was ancient beyond measure, her species one of the oldest in the galaxy. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes held the weight of 10,000 years. She rarely spoke, but when she did, the galaxy listened. Around her stood the Void Talents, her personal guard. They were legendary warriors, enhanced with cybernetics and psionic implants. Each one had killed more enemies than Elias could count. Their commander, a massive figure named Sarath, stood closest to the Empress. His body was covered in scars and metal, and his eyes glowed with artificial light. Elias watched the Void Talents with professional interest. Before becoming a diplomat, he had been a soldier, a combat medic during Earth unification wars. He had seen violence. He had lived through it. He had saved lives and taken them. Those days were behind him now. But the instincts remained. Something caught his attention. Near the edge of the hall, a server was moving between the delegates. The server carried a tray of drinks, smiling politely at the guests. Everything about the scene looked normal, but Elias noticed something wrong. The server's movements were too smooth, too controlled. There was no nervousness in the way the server walked, no hesitation. Every step was measured. Every gesture was precise. Elias had seen people move like that before. Soldiers move like that. Killers move like that. He watched the server for a long moment. The server never looked at the Empress directly, never glanced at the Void Talons. But Elias noticed how the server was slowly working closer to the throne. It was probably nothing. Elias told himself it was probably nothing, but his heart beat a little faster. He looked around the hall more carefully now. He noticed a diplomat he did not recognize. The diplomat was listed on the manifest, but something about the way the diplomat stood seemed wrong. Too alert. Too ready. Elias noticed guards who were slightly out of position. The changes were small. Anyone else would have missed them. He heard something too. A strange sound at the edge of hearing. A harmonic frequency that made his teeth ache. He did not know what it meant, but it felt wrong. His instinct screamed at him. Elias made a decision. He walked toward Commander Sareth of the Void Talons. The massive warrior looked down at him with obvious contempt. "Ambassador Vance," Sareth said, "you are far from your corner of the hall." "Commander, I need to speak with you," Elias said quietly. "I believe something is wrong. Some of the servers, the guards, they are not behaving normally. There is a frequency in the air that should not be there." Sareth stared at him for a long moment. Then the commander laughed. "A human comes to warn the Void Talons of danger?" Sareth shook his head. "Your species sees predators in every shadow. It is because you evolved as prey. Your ancestors spent millions of years being hunted, and now you jump at every movement." "Commander, please," Elias pressed. "I have combat experience. I know when something feels wrong." "Combat experience?" Sarath's voice dripped with mockery. "You fought other humans. Small, weak creatures killing each other over patches of dirt on your little world. You have no understanding of real combat, of real danger." The commander stepped closer. He towered over Elias like a mountain. "Go back to your corner, human. Observe. Learn. Leave the protection of the Empress to warriors who actually know what they are doing." Elias felt anger rise in his chest, but he controlled it. He had learned long ago that anger without purpose was useless. "I hope you are right, Commander," Elias said quietly. "I hope I am jumping at shadows." He turned and walked away. Behind him, Sareth muttered something to another Void Talon. They both laughed. Elias returned to his position near the back of the hall. He watched the server who had caught his attention. The server was still working closer to the throne. The ceremony was about to begin. The Empress was preparing to speak. In a few moments, the Treaty of Eternal Accord would be signed, and the galaxy would enter a new age of peace. Elias wanted to believe that everything would be fine, but his hands had started to shake. Not from fear, from something else. Something his body remembered from the old days. From the wars. It was the feeling he got before everything went wrong. He stood in the grand celestial hall of Seraphis Prime, surrounded by beings who thought he was weak and useless. He had no weapons, no powers, no authority. All he had was a feeling in his gut. And a certain knowledge that no one would listen to him. The Empress rose from her throne. The ceremony began, and somewhere in the shadows, death was waiting. The hours passed slowly as the delegates prepared for the signing. Elias moved through the crowds, watching and listening. His warning to Commander Sareth had been ignored, but his instincts had not calmed down. He found a quiet corner near a window that looked out at the stars. For a moment, he allowed himself to remember 10 years ago. He had been a different man. Younger, harder, covered in blood more often than not. The unification wars on Earth had been brutal. Nations had fought nations. Cities had burned. Millions had died. Elias had served as a combat medic. His job was to run into the worst places, the killing fields, and bring back the wounded. He had saved many lives. He had also killed when he had no choice. The scars on his body told the story. Burn marks on his left arm from a chemical attack. A deep line across his chest from a knife fight in the ruins of a hospital. Damaged nerves in his right hand from a bullet that had nearly ended his career. He had survived when others had not. He did not know why. Some days, he felt guilty about it. After the wars ended, Elias had chosen a different path. He became a diplomat. He told himself that he had seen enough death. That he wanted to build things instead of destroy them. But the soldier never truly left him. It lived in his bones. In the way he watched doorways. In the way he counted exits. In the way he noticed threats that others missed. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Ambassador Vance? He turned to find a young Kethmer standing before him. She was smaller than most of her species, with a softer exoskeleton that suggested youth. Her forearms were folded politely, and her compound eyes studied him with curiosity. I am Kethva, she said. I am attached with the Kethmer delegation. May I speak with you? Elias nodded. Of course. Kethva moved to stand beside him at the window. She looked out at the stars for a moment before speaking again. I have studied your species, she said. Humans are very interesting to me. I hope you do not find this offensive. Not at all, Elias replied. What have you learned? Many things, but also many questions. She turned to face him. Your species is young. You have only had space travel for a short time. Yet your history is filled with violence, wars, conflicts, suffering. You fight each other constantly. Elias nodded slowly. It was a common observation from other species. And yet, Kethva continued, you also create beautiful things. Art, music, stories. You build great cities and then destroy them. You kill each other and then weep for the dead. I do not understand this. Why do humans fight so many wars among themselves? It was a difficult question. Elias thought about it carefully before answering. Because we refuse to accept that anything is impossible, he said finally. Including peace. Kethva tilted her head. I do not understand. We fight because we believe things can be better. We disagree about how to make them better. Sometimes we are wrong. Sometimes we are foolish. But we keep trying. We keep pushing. We keep believing that tomorrow can be different from today. He looked out at the stars. Other species look at our history and see only war. But I look at our history and see something else. I see a species that refuses to give up. That keeps standing up no matter how many times it falls. Kethva was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I think I understand a little better now, she said. Thank you, Ambassador. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. After a while, Kethva returned to her delegation, but she promised to speak with Elias again. He found that he liked her. She reminded him of young soldiers he had known during the wars. Curious, eager, still innocent enough to ask questions. He hoped she would keep that innocence. The ceremony was drawing closer now. Delegates were moving toward the central platform where the Empress sat. The air was thick with tension, and Hope. Elias decided to walk through the hall one more time. He told himself it was just to observe. But really, he was still looking for threats. He passed a group of SARI delegates. Their crystalline bodies hummed with internal light, and their voices sounded like wind chimes. They spoke of trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Normal diplomatic conversation. He passed a cluster of Velkori nobles. They spoke of power and influence and legacy. Their voices dripped with arrogance. Also normal. He passed a door that should have been guarded. It was not. Elias stopped. He looked at the door. 2 guards should have been standing there. He had seen them earlier. Now they were gone. His heart began to beat faster as he approached the door carefully. It was slightly open. He could see a corridor beyond it, leading to a service area. Every instinct told him to investigate. But he was a diplomat now, not a soldier. He had no authority here. No weapons. No backup. If he was wrong, he would embarrass himself and his species. If he was right. He heard footsteps behind him. Commander Sareth appeared with 2 void talons at his side. "Ambassador," Sareth said coldly, "you seem lost." "This door should be guarded," Elias said. "Where are the guards?" Sareth looked at the door with a bored expression. "Perhaps they are on patrol. Perhaps they stepped away for a moment. It is not your concern. Commander, please. Something is wrong. I can feel it." Sareth stepped very close to Elias. His cybernetic eyes glowed with annoyance. "You can feel it?" The commander's voice was mocking. "Tell me, human, what combat experience do you truly have? Have you fought psionic warriors who can kill with a thought? Have you faced enemies whose blood is acid? Have you battled in the void of space with no gravity and no air?" Elias met the commander's gaze. "No. Then you know nothing of real danger. Your feelings are the fears of a prey animal. Nothing more." Sareth turned away dismissively. "The ceremony begins soon. Return to your position. And do not bother us again with your paranoia." The commander walked away with his warriors. They did not look back. Elias stood alone by the unguarded door. His hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. Something cold had settled into his chest. Something he remembered from the old days. It was the calm before battle. The strange peace that came when he knew death was close. He looked at the door. He looked at the ceremony beginning across the hall. He looked at the Empress sitting on her throne, surrounded by guards who believed themselves invincible. He could walk away. He could stand in his corner and watch. He could be the quiet, harmless human that everyone expected him to be. But Elias Vance had never been good at doing what was expected. He made a choice. He stayed near the center of the hall, as close to the throne as a minor diplomat could get. He positioned himself where he could see the most threats, where he could move quickly if needed. He had no weapons. He had no powers. He had no backup. All he had was a soldier's instincts and a stubborn refusal to look away from danger. The Empress rose from her throne to address the delegates. The moment of truth had arrived, and Elias Vance stood ready for what was coming. Empress Ithavelari's voice filled the grand celestial hall like music. She spoke of peace, of unity, of a future where the 12 species would work together instead of preparing for war. The delegates listened, in respectful silence. Even the arrogant Velkori bowed their heads. This was a moment that would be remembered for centuries. Elias watched from his position near the central platform. His eyes moved constantly, scanning the crowd, watching the servers, watching the guards, watching the shadows. The Empress lifted a ceremonial stylus. The Treaty of Eternal Accord lay before her on a floating pedestal. One signature would change history. She began to sign. The harmonic frequency Elias had noticed earlier suddenly grew louder. It was no longer at the edge of hearing. It was a scream of energy that cut through the air like a knife. And then, the world exploded. Assassins materialized from nothing. They dropped their cloaking fields and appeared in the middle of the hall. There were at least 20 of them, dressed in black armor with no markings. They carried molecular disruptors, weapons that could tear through any shield. The first shots killed 3 void talons before anyone could react. Commander Sareth roared a battle cry and charged toward the nearest assassin. His cybernetic arms swung with deadly force. He killed one attacker with a single blow, but another assassin appeared behind him. A disruptor blast caught the commander in the back. Seraph fell. He did not get up. Chaos consumed the hall. The Shari delegates shattered under disruptor fire, their crystalline bodies breaking into 1,000 pieces. Valkyrie nobles screamed and ran, trampling each other in their panic. The Kethmer warriors drew their weapons, but they were outnumbered and confused. Elias saw the server he had watched earlier. The server had thrown aside the tray of drinks. Now the server held a disruptor and was cutting down delegates with cold efficiency. He had been right. He had been right about everything. But being right did not matter now. Only survival mattered. The remaining Void Talons formed a circle around the Empress. There were only 5 of them left. They fought with desperate courage, but the assassins pressed closer with every second. A Void Talon fell. Then another. Elias watched the defense crumbling. He watched the mighty warriors of the galaxy dying. He watched species that had mocked humanity for being weak, proving themselves no better when real danger came. The Valkyrie ran. The Shari shattered. The Kethmer hesitated. Everyone was running or dying or frozen with fear. Everyone, except Elias Vance. He did not understand why he moved forward. There was no logical reason. He had no weapons, no armor, no chance of survival. The smart thing to do was run. The safe thing to do was hide. But something inside him refused. It was not courage. He did not feel brave. He felt terrified. His heart pounded so hard, he thought it might burst. His body screamed at him to flee, but his legs carried him forward anyway. One of the last Void Talons fell, her body burned by disruptor fire. Her blade clattered on the stone floor near Elias's feet. He picked it up. The blade was heavy. It was designed for a creature twice his size. It was not meant for human hands. Elias gripped it anyway. He stepped over the bodies of fallen guards. He stepped past delegates who cowered and wept. He stepped between the assassins and the wounded Empress. One of the assassins laughed. It was a cold, mechanical sound that came through the helmet speakers. "What is this?" the assassin asked. "A human?" Other assassins turned to look. Some of them lowered their weapons, amused by the sight. "The little Terran wants to play hero," another assassin said. "How adorable." Elias said nothing. He adjusted his grip on the blade. He steadied his breathing. He let the old training take over. The assassin leader stepped forward. Even through the black armor, Elias could sense the creature's confidence. The leader was tall, powerful, enhanced with technology that made a human look like a child in comparison. "Step aside, little creature," the leader said. "We have no quarrel with your species. This does not concern you." Elias found his voice. It came out steady and calm, which surprised him. "You want her?" he said, nodding toward the Empress. "Come through me." More laughter from the assassins. "Through you?" The leader sounded genuinely amused. "You are human. Soft skin, weak bones. No natural weapons. No enhancements. What could you possibly do against us?" Elias thought about the question. He thought about human history. He thought about everything his species had survived. "I could refuse to move," he said simply. The leader's laughter stopped. Something in Elias's voice had changed the mood. "Kill him," the leader ordered. "Quickly. We waste time." An assassin raised a disruptor and fired. Elias moved. He did not know he could move that fast. The shot burned past his shoulder, close enough to singe his suit. He twisted, dropped low, and drove the blade upward. The assassin fell. Everything happened very quickly after that. Elias did not think. Thinking was too slow. He let his body remember. He let the training from the Unification Wars take control. An assassin swung at him. He ducked. He struck. The assassin fell. A disruptor blast hit him in the left arm. Pain exploded through his body. His arm went numb. He kept fighting. Another assassin came at him with a molecular blade. Elias caught the blade on his own weapon, twisted, and kicked the assassin in the knee. The joint bent the wrong way. The assassin screamed and fell. More pain. A blade across his back. Disruptor burns on his side. Blood running down his face from a cut he did not remember receiving. Elias kept fighting. Behind him, the Empress lay wounded on her throne. Her remaining guards had fallen. She was helpless. Dying, perhaps, but Elias stood between her and death. The assassins pressed forward. They were confused now, angry. They had expected this to be easy. They had expected the weak human to fall in seconds, but seconds became a minute. A minute became 2 and Elias Vance refused to die. His body was failing. He knew it. He could feel his strength fading. The wounds were too many. The blood loss was too great, but he kept standing. He kept fighting, because that was what humans did. Somewhere across the hall, HFY watched the impossible sight of a single human holding back an army. Something stirred in her chest. Something that felt like shame. She looked at the other HFY warriors around her. They were frozen, waiting, watching. She thought about what Elias had told her, about refusing to give up, about believing tomorrow could be different. She raised her weapon. HFY, she shouted. Are we prey? Are we cowards? A human stands alone against our enemies. Will we do nothing? Her warriors looked at her. They looked at the human who would not fall. One by one, they raised their weapons. The tide began to turn. The HFY warriors charged into battle behind HFY. Their weapons sang with deadly energy. Their war cries filled the air. The assassins turned to face this new threat. Their formation broke. Their confident assault became a desperate defense. But Elias barely noticed. His world had shrunk to the space immediately around him, to the enemies in front of him, to the wounded Empress behind him. An assassin lunged at him with a blade. Elias parried the strike. His arms screamed with exhaustion. His muscles burned. His wounds bled freely. He killed the assassin anyway. Another took its place. Then another. The assassin leader pushed through the chaos toward Elias. The leader was enormous, at least 8 feet tall, covered in armor that hummed with energy shields. You should be dead, the leader growled. Your species cannot sustain this much damage. Your body should have failed. Elias did not answer. He was too busy staying alive. The leader attacked with terrifying speed. A blade flashed toward Elias's chest. He tried to block. He was too slow. The blade punched through his shoulder. White-hot agony exploded through his body. The blade scraped against bone. Blood sprayed across the stone floor. Elias grabbed the leader's arm with his free hand. He pulled himself closer to the assassin instead of away. The leader had not expected that. No prey animal would move toward the source of pain. But humans were not prey. Elias drove his blade into the gap between the leader's helmet and chest plate. The leader staggered. The grip on the weapon and Elias's shoulder loosened. Elias twisted his own blade. The leader made a choking sound and fell. The assassin's blade was still buried in Elias's shoulder. He reached up, gripped the handle, and pulled it out. Fresh blood poured from the wound. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt. He used the assassin's blade in his other hand now. 2 weapons. 2 chances to survive. The remaining assassins looked at their fallen leader. They looked at the human who stood over the body, covered in blood, holding a blade in each hand. Fear entered their eyes. They had been told humans were weak. They had been told humans were prey animals who would run at the first sign of danger. They had been told this mission would be simple. No one had told them about human stubbornness, about human endurance, about the strange fire that burned in human hearts. Kill him, one assassin screamed. He is just one human. Kill him. 3 assassins attacked at once. Elias moved on pure instinct. He blocked one strike. He dodged another. The third cut across his ribs, opening a wound that should have dropped him. He kept fighting. His body was operating beyond its limits now. Adrenaline flooded his system. Pain became distant, like thunder from a faraway storm. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. Everything that was not the enemy disappeared. This was what humans called the zone. The state where the body pushed past every normal limit. The state where death became just another obstacle to overcome. The Kethmer warriors fought beside him now. Kethva appeared at his left, her forearms wielding weapons with deadly precision. Other warriors filled the gaps, forming a wall of resistance against the assassins. But Elias remained at the center. He was the rock that the enemy could not move. He was the wall that would not break. Minutes passed. Each one felt like an hour. Elias lost count of how many times he should have died. A blade across his back that missed his spine by inches. A disruptor blast that burned his side but did not hit anything vital. A strike to his head that opened his scalp but did not crack his skull. His body was failing. He could feel it. His movements were slower. His strikes were weaker. Blood loss was stealing his strength. But he would not fall. An assassin broke through the Kethmer line and rushed toward the Empress. Elias threw himself into the assassin's path. They crashed together. They fell. They struggled on the blood-slicked floor. The assassin was stronger, fresher, uninjured. Elias was dying. He headbutted the assassin anyway. The impact cracked the assassin's faceplate. The assassin reeled back in shock. Elias grabbed the fallen blade and ended the fight. He tried to stand. His legs refused. He fell to his knees, but he stayed between the Empress and the enemy. Even on his knees, he raised his weapons. Even on his knees, he refused to surrender. The assassins hesitated. There were only 7 of them left. They looked at the human who would not die. They looked at the Kethmer warriors who had found their courage. They looked at the other delegates who were starting to fight back. The attack was failing. One assassin turned to run. Then another. Kethva cut them down before they could escape. The last 5 assassins formed a tight circle. They prepared to die fighting. They had no other choice now. Distant sounds reached Elias's ears. Alarms. Shouting. The thunder of reinforcements finally arriving. Security forces poured into the hall. Elite soldiers from a dozen species. Ships had been scrambled. Armies had been mobilized. The attack on the Grand Celestial Hall had triggered every emergency response in the system. The remaining assassins were overwhelmed in seconds, and then it was over. Elias knelt on the bloody floor, surrounded by the dead. His body had finally reached its absolute limit. The blades fell from his hands. His vision blurred. His heartbeat slowed. One of the last assassins lay nearby, dying from a wound Elias had given. The assassin's mask had fallen away, revealing a face Elias did not recognize. Some species he had never seen before. The assassin looked at him with fading eyes. How? The assassin whispered, "You are human. Soft, weak. How did you do this?" Elias tried to answer. He tasted blood in his mouth. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "We evolved on a death world," he said. "Everything on our planet tried to kill us. Predators, disease, weather, each other." He coughed. "More blood. We are still here." The assassin died without understanding. Elias felt hands on him. Someone was calling his name. He heard Kethva's voice, filled with fear. "Ambassador, stay awake. Medical teams are coming. Stay awake." Elias wanted to tell her it was fine. He wanted to tell her he had done what he needed to do. He wanted to tell her that the Empress was safe, but the darkness was too heavy. It pulled him down. His last thought was of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests, of a small planet that had created a species too stubborn to quit. Then the darkness took him. He did not feel himself falling. He did not hear Kethva screaming for help. He did not see the Empress, wounded but alive, looking at the fallen human who had saved her life. Elias Vance simply stopped for 7 minutes. A single human had held back an army. Now the question was whether he would live to know it. Light returned slowly. Soft at first, then brighter. Colors swam into focus. Shapes became clear. Elias Vance opened his eyes. He was lying in a medical pod filled with warm liquid that tingled against his skin. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that hummed with quiet efficiency. The ceiling above him was white and clean. He was alive. The realization surprised him. He had expected to die on that bloody floor. He had made peace with it. A face appeared above him. An alien physician with 4 eyes and gentle hands. The physician smiled warmly. "Ambassador Vance, you are awake. This is excellent news." Elias tried to speak. His throat was dry. His voice came out as a croak. "How long?" 3 days. "Your injuries were severe. Any other species would have died. But your body..." The physician shook its head in wonder. "We have never seen anything like it. Your cells began repairing themselves at an extraordinary rate once we stabilized you. Some of my colleagues want to study your species further. They cannot believe what they witnessed." Elias closed his eyes. 3 days. It felt like 3 minutes. The Empress? Alive, recovering. She asks about you constantly. Relief washed through him. It had been worth it. All the pain, all the blood. It had been worth it. Over the next several hours, visitors came and went. Kethva was first. She sat beside his pod and wept openly. She told him that his actions had inspired her, that watching him fight had changed something inside her, that she would never forget what she had seen. Elias did not know what to say. He had not fought to inspire anyone. He had simply fought because he could not walk away. Other delegates came to pay their respects. Valkyrie lords who had mocked him now bowed their heads. Shari elders who had dismissed humanity now spoke words of deep gratitude. Even the surviving Kethmer warriors came, their compound eyes filled with newfound respect. The galaxy had watched a human stand alone against impossible odds. The galaxy had watched him refuse to die. Nothing would ever be the same. On the 5th day, Elias was strong enough to leave the medical pod. His body was still healing. Scars marked his skin where the wounds had been deepest. The physician said some of them would never fully fade. He did not mind. Scars were proof of survival. A message arrived for him that evening. The Empress requested his presence in her private chambers. Elias dressed carefully in a clean formal suit. He walked slowly through the corridors of the palace. Guards bowed to him as he passed. Servants stepped aside with respectful whispers. The private chambers of Empress Ifavelari were smaller than he expected. Simple, elegant, a room for rest, not ceremony. The Empress sat on a simple chair near a window that showed the stars. She was still weak from her injuries. Bandages covered parts of her ancient body, but her eyes were sharp and bright. "Ambassador Vance," she said. Her voice was softer now, tired, but still carried authority. "Please, sit." Elias sat across from her. For a long moment, neither spoke. "I have ruled for 10,000 years," the Empress finally said. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed wars that consumed entire systems. I have known heroes and villains, saints and monsters." She leaned forward slightly. "I have never seen anything like what you did in that hall." Elias did not know how to respond. He stayed quiet. "My Void Talons were the finest warriors in the galaxy. enhanced, trained, fearless. They fell in moments. The Empress's voice carried sadness. Commander Sareth laughed at your warnings. He dismissed you as prey. He was wrong, Elias said quietly. Yes, he was. The Empress studied him with ancient eyes. Tell me, Ambassador, why did you step forward? You had no obligation. You had no chance. Every rational calculation said you should run. Elias thought about the question. He thought about the moment when everything went wrong. The moment when he chose to move toward danger instead of away from it. Because someone had to, he said finally. And I was there. The Empress waited. She sensed there was more. Humans have always believed that someone could be anyone, Elias continued. That heroism is not about being the strongest or the fastest. It is about choosing not to look away, choosing to act when action is needed. He looked at the stars through the window. We are a small species. Weak compared to others. We have no natural weapons, no special powers. But we have this one thing. We refuse to accept that the impossible is impossible. We refuse to surrender to fear. The Empress was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I am going to do something that has not been done in 3,000 years. I am going to grant a species a new title, a new status in the galactic order. She rose from her chair. Despite her injuries, despite her age, she stood tall and proud. From this day forward, humanity will no longer be called the infant newcomers. You will be called the unyielding, the species that steps forward when all others step back. Elias felt something stir in his chest. Pride, not for himself but for his species. For all the humans who had ever refused to quit. The Treaty of Eternal Accord was signed 2 days ago. The Empress continued. The attack meant to stop it only made the delegates more determined. They saw what happens when one person refuses to give up. They saw hope. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. You saved my life, Elias Vance. But more than that, you showed the galaxy what humanity truly is. Not weak, not prey, but something far more dangerous. What is that? Elias asked. The Empress smiled. Unstoppable. The next weeks passed in a blur of diplomacy and recovery. Elias gave interviews. He attended ceremonies. He shook hands with leaders who had never noticed him before. He did not enjoy the attention. He was a soldier who had become a diplomat. Not a hero, not a symbol, but he understood why it mattered. Humanity needed this moment. They needed the galaxy to see them differently. On his last night on Seraphis Prime, Elias stood at an observation window in the diplomatic quarters. Stars stretched out before him. Billions of worlds. Trillions of lives. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue dot circling a yellow sun. His home. Footsteps approached. Kefva joined him at the window. You are leaving tomorrow, she said. Yes, I am needed back home. There is much to do. They stood together in comfortable silence for a while. What will humanity do now? Kefva asked. You have new influence, new power. The galaxy will listen when you speak. Elias considered the question. He thought about human history, about the wars and the peace, about the suffering and the hope. What we have always done, he said finally. Survive, adapt, and remind the universe that we are still here. Kefva nodded slowly. I think I am glad humans found their way to the stars. So am I. They watched the stars together. Two friends from different worlds. Two species learning to understand each other. Behind them, the lights of the palace glowed warmly. Ahead of them, the universe waited with all its dangers and wonders. And somewhere in that vast darkness, a small species called humanity was just getting started. Elias smiled. The stars reflected in his tired eyes. The future was uncertain. The challenges were endless. The enemies were many, but that had always been true for humans, and they were still here,